How to survive every trap in Saw 3. Hello, I want to play a game. This quote from Saw is one of the most recognizable movie quotes of all time, turning Saw into a multi-million-dollar franchise. In today's video, we will cover each and every trap on Saw 3 and tell you how to survive, or at least escape from them, if you ever find yourself in the unfortunate situation of being one of Saw's victims. First, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so that you never miss one of our videos. The classroom trap. The victim of this trap was Troy. Troy became involved in altercations with the law several times, leading him to be incarcerated. Additionally, Troy was also a drug addict and was in rehabilitation at the Homeward Bound Clinic. It is also insinuated that Troy was born into a life of privilege, and yet he still chose to embark on a path of crime. What is the trap? Troy was stripped almost entirely naked and placed in an elementary school classroom. 11 chains hung from the floor, walls, and ceiling, all attached to Troy by rings that pierced his hands, shoulders, Achilles tendons, arms, external obliques, and jaw. A nail explosive with a timer was placed in front of him. It is also important to note that the only door was welded shut, and it's assumed that the windows were unable to open as well. This trap was set up by Amanda and was not intended to be survivable. What did the victim do? In his panic and state of adrenaline, Troy manages to rip out every ring except for the one that pierced through his jaw. Troy tried to rip out the one in his jaw, but before he could muster the strength to rip out the final one, the timer went off. How do you escape the trap? To survive this trap, it's important to understand your bodily anatomy. The rings that pierce Troy's shoulders, arms, and external obliques all appear to be surface piercings and shouldn't cause any true damage. Though the ones in the hands are deeper, you should be alright to remove those as well. As for the ones that pierce the jaw and Achilles tendons, those should not be removed, as the risk of blood loss is too big and you risk the change of a pulmonary embolism, which is when a blood clot spreads to the lungs. Once you've removed the surface piercings, you should be able to reach some of the desks. By stacking a wall and hiding behind them, you should be able to protect yourself from the explosion. With luck, the explosion should be heard, and you won't have to worry about escaping the room. The angel trap. The victim of this trap was Allison Carey, a detective who has dedicated her life to protecting society from people such as Jigsaw. Jigsaw's reasoning for having her tested is because she enjoyed her work involving death too much, and that she preferred to work with the dead rather than building relationships with alive individuals. However, we as well as many fans suspect that Jigsaw just wanted Carey out of the way. What is the trap? In this trap, Carey wore a leather harness that was secured with a padlock around her torso. This harness kept her slightly suspended above the ground by 2 chains. 2 mechanical arms resemble wings folded behind her. The wings are attached to her ribcage with brackets and wires. Once the game begins, Carey has to free herself within 60 seconds, or else the mechanical wings will spread and thereby rip her ribcage apart. The key to the padlock sits in a glass of acid directly in front of her, suspended by 2 chains. If she does not act quickly, the acid will dissolve the key and her only hope will be lost. It is also important to mention that Amanda set up this trap and had no intention of Carey surviving, something that would later be revealed that Jigsaw was disappointed in her for. What did the victim do? Carey panics and tries to pull the device off of her, but she can't. Eventually, she musters the courage to get the key from the acid, but cannot get the courage to pull the device from her ribs. However, even opening the lock, the trap goes off, meaning this trap was rigged. How do you escape the trap? Assuming that this trap was not rigged, the easiest way to get the key would be to pour out the acid, since the jar that it's in is not fixed in place, but rather suspended and can be removed. By removing the acid, you should be able to retrieve the key with only minor burns. Another way to break free of this trap would be to pour the acid on the wires, which attach the rips to the contraption. Since the acid would dissolve the key, it would most likely melt the wires too. That way, when the trap goes off, you'd be free to walk. This method is risky, considering you could spill it onto your stomach and burn yourself. The shotgun collar. The victim of this trap was Dr. Lynn Denion. Jigsaw chose her as a test subject because she cheated on her husband and has been neglecting her daughter. Primarily, she was just used as leverage for Jeff's final test. What is the trap? This trap consists of a collar that was secured around her neck that had 5 shotgun shells aimed directly at her head. The collar was attuned to John Kramer's, aka Jigsaw's, heart monitor. In addition, there was also a remote that could set off the collar at any moment. If he died during the game, his heart rate went dangerously low, or one of them moved out of range, then the collar would go off. Once her husband finished his own game, she would be released. Jigsaw's hope for this trap was that Lin will be able to treat his tumor, and he will be able to continue his experiments, and in his twisted mind, help others. What did the victim do? The victim does not have the opportunity to save Jigsaw, because she is shot by Amanda and her husband slices Jigsaw's throat, which makes his blood pressure drop. This activates Lin's collar. How do you escape the trap? If Lin would have taken the time to better examine the room, she would have noticed saws and other surgical tools that she could have used to break free from the trap. Of course, to do this, she would either need to do it behind Jigsaw and Amanda's back, or somehow disable them. Lin was given the opportunity to kill Amanda at one point, but chooses not to, out of fear that John will hear and set off the collar. If Lin would have taken this opportunity, she would have been able to get the key that is around Amanda's neck. The pitfall of Lin would be the lack of communication between her and her husband. If Lin would have communicated to her husband, they could have better understood what was happening and helped her escape the collar. Jeff's trial. The victim of this trap is Jeff Denlon. His reason for being tested is his obsession with vengeance and the neglect of his daughter. What is the trap? Jeff wakes up inside of a crate on a forklift inside of the abandoned meat packaging plant. To escape, Jeff must face a series of tests to overcome his obsession with revenge for his son, Dylan, who passed away in a car accident. Throughout the meat packaging plant, there are several parts of a gun that can be assembled that he may need later. If Jeff does not escape the plant within 2 hours, he will be locked in and left to die there. As we go through the other traps, we will follow Jeff and how he gets through them. How do you escape the trap? To escape the tests that are laid out, you must remain calm and get past your obsession. However, even if you push through the challenges just long enough for the duration of your test, you'll be able to survive and hopefully bring Jigsaw's victims justice. The freezer room. Who was the victim of this trap? The victim of this trap was Danica Scott, who was the only witness to the death of Jeff's son and didn't speak out because of the shock. What is the trap? Danica is stripped entirely naked inside of a freezer room and is chained by the arms to the ceiling. There are 2 vertical pipes on each side of her that spray water from 6 nozzles onto her in periodic intervals. The key to her chains hangs on a wire behind multiple extremely hot cooling pipes that are just out of Jeff's reach because of the pipes. Danica cannot escape without Jeff's help. How do you escape the trap? By taking off one of his jackets, Jeff can cover the pipes so that they spray onto the clothes and not Danica. This will lengthen the amount of time that Danica has before she freezes to death. By using a piece of fabric from one of Jeff's other jackets, he could easily grab the key with no pain and free Danica. Even though Danica appears to be dead by the time Jeff gets the key, Jeff still could have helped her. By taking her out of the freezer, removing the ice from her skin, and covering her with a jacket or 2, there is a slim chance that she could have survived. The pig vat. The victim of this trap was Judge Halden, who lightly sentenced Timothy Young, who was responsible for Jeff's son's death. What is the trap? Judge Halden was chained to the bottom of a large cylindrical vat. Next to it was a large blender with interlocking saws. Once the game began, rotten pig carcasses hanging from a conveyor belt were dropped into the blender. The liquefied pig carcasses would then go down the chute and into the vat. If not stopped, Halden would drown. The only way for Halden to survive is to rely on Jeff to help him. The key to the chains is placed inside of an incinerator alongside Jeff's son's memorabilia. To obtain the key, the possessions must be burned, and then the key will fall into the ashtray. How do you escape the trap? Though Jeff manages to destroy his son's belongings to get the key, another way to beat the trap is to pull the picks from the conveyor belt. Seeing how easy they're knocked off, this shouldn't be too much of a problem. By doing this, the sludge that fills the vat won't be produced and Halden won't fall. From here, this gives Jeff time to either break into the furnace and get the key, or escape the building and get the judge help. The rack. The victim of this trap was Timothy Young, a 27-year-old medical student and father. However, that isn't all. He was also the drunk driver who ran over Jeff's son. What is the trap? The rack is a contraption resembling a metal crucifix. On the arm segments, there are mechanical gears. Timothy's arms are bolted to the arms of the machine to prevent him from moving any further. Once the game is activated, the gears twist each limb one at a time, starting with the arms, then the legs, and then finally the head. This causes the bones to break and the tendons to rupture. The key to free Timothy is inside of a glass box, but the moment the key is taken, the gun goes off. How do you escape the trap? This is one of the simplest traps to debunk. All of the wires are exposed, so to stop the trap, you must dislodge or cut the wires. Another way to stop, or at least slow the trap, is to stuff fabric from your clothing or lodge anything between the gears. This will make it difficult for the gears to turn and hopefully break the trap. If you didn't break the wires or lodge the gears, you can still survive. To get the key, you could try to break the glass or pull the key and keep your arm to the side so it won't get shot by the gun. Do any of you have your own ways to beat these traps? Let us know in the comments how you would survive. Remember, the best way to avoid becoming one of Jigsaw's victims is to appreciate life. Hey you! Yeah, you! You like this video? Great! We got another one for you that we guarantee you would like. All you have to do is click on the screen. It's free and without any hidden fees, but you have to click fast because this message will self-destruct in 5 seconds.